working with the Sage 300 construction and real estate products since the year 2000. Started my career at Timberline, what they used to be called Timberline back at Sage in the support division, and I do support for all of the accounting products, but not estimating, so we're all the accounting. Today what we're going to do is, this is just a review class. We're not going to get into a lot of details. You should have received the PowerPoint presentation. I know that's nice to have for notes. I try not to just read off of PowerPoint presentations. I find that boring myself, so we're just going to use that as a guide. And we're going to go through several things, but again, it's a review class, and really the goal is to get your brain just in that year-end mode and remind you of the things that have to be done. We can always come back and look at a few things in more detail if there are specific questions. So with that, I'm going to get started here. I have the slide in kind of a little bit unusual presentation because I want to be able to minimize it. There's a couple other things I want to show you, and if I want to get into the software, I want to show you that too. So it may not look full screen on your computer. Just kind of bear with me on that. All right. Let's see here. Skipped a slide for some reason. Sorry about that. So what we're going to talk about is just kind of what the year-end processes are doing, what they're doing when you close the year, and that's what we're always usually asking about. Is like, what do I have to do at the end of the year? What modules do I have to close? What is this doing really? And really, what the point of this is that it goes through and it will close your years, meaning that it will take your year-to-date totals and zero them out and shift them over into the prior year. And then most of the modules, you'll have the next year total becomes, 2020. So we're in 2018 right now. When we close the year, 2018 obviously becomes the prior year to date totals. Year to date is 2019. And then modules such as AP and job costs will have next year totals too. So that's really what that's doing there, is having the system close those out. There are also other, what I call housekeeping processes that can be done at year end. You can move checks, you can move jobs. A lot of the archiving that happens, you're going to see all of that information listed in the Sage users year end guide, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that, as of 12/31 or as of the end of your fiscal year end for general ledger. You can plan that accordingly. And sometimes it's better to do that over several days, because if you have large data or if you've never archived your data before, you really want to talk to somebody about a good archive plan to make sure that you're doing that in the right order, where to do it, make sure you have backups and that type of thing. So year end is a time to really think about it and get a plan in action for that. And really, once you have that plan in action for archiving and kind of housekeeping of your data, you should be able to keep that plan every year. So, for example, if your fiscal year end is 12/31, but your accountants really don't have things wrapped up normally until maybe March or April, then maybe the end of April is like your time of the year that you normally will yearly review all of the data that you're going to archive. And then maybe that's a more appropriate time. We're all busy this time of the year just because of payroll and AP, especially payroll. And then if you add your fiscal year end ending on the calendar year, then you have lots of other stuff to think about too. So it just gets to be a busy time of year. I don't want you to panic that you have to do all that right now too. Does anybody have questions on that? Okay. There is one slide that I'm missing that I'm not sure why it's not displaying. But one slide that I wanted to show you, and I think you might have it printed out. It's a where to find help basically, and I might have this at the end. But one thing that I'm going to be referring to quite often today during our class is the Sage user guide. And I'm actually going to pull that up. I saved a copy of it. This is a guide that has everything you need to know about year end. It has all the detailed steps. That's why I don't have to read you this guide. This really gives you an overview of everything you need, and this should have been sent to you too also in an email. And that's why, I'm not going to go through producing ACA forms because you might not be a company that needs to do that. But if you are one, you can see that there are specific steps here in a chapter just on ACA forms. Same with the W-2 forms. I'll show you today where you need to go for that and updating those forms, but we're not going to go through producing them on this session today. But the other thing I wanted to point out is that the appendixes are really important in this year-end guide. They're kind of good to have on hand all year round, actually, because there are archive procedures in here, and it has a whole bunch of listings of, what to archive and when to move things, and there's a lot of involved questions there to think about. But the other thing that the backup procedure guide has, which is part of archiving or closing your month, is that you need to know what files to back up. So, for example, you go to close payroll, and those that process payroll, you get that message every month that says, do you have a backup of your, master PRM file? We don't always tell the truth that. I know that for a fact. We say, yep, sure we do, and we go on. But if you are really following the rules and you do a backup before you close payroll like you should, you don't need to back up your entire data folder. You only need to back up the files that are related to payroll. And so this guide has a really nice little cheat sheet for, okay, if I'm closing payroll, here are the files that I need to back up. And then it also has the steps for how to back those up using file tools. All right, so that Appendix A, and especially this page right here, I think is a nice, handy printout to have, kind of posted on your bulletin board there at your desk to say, okay, if I'm backing up job costs, this is what I need to back up first. Before you close a month, you really should back up your files. The reason that they ask you to do that is because, the rare circumstance that the power goes out or your computer aborts or something happens at the server right in the middle of closing that, you want to have a backup to make sure that if something goes wrong, you have something to restore to. And the reason you don't need the full data folder is that when you're in payroll, for example, closing the payroll month, you're not touching all of the files in Sage. So nor do you need a permanent backup. You just need a temporary backup that you save it. Once it closes, you can get rid of that backup. Everything went okay. So they're not backups typically that you're going to save forever that before close month processes. Any questions on that? All right, bounce back over to here. So let's start diving into the specific modules here. Payroll is always the scariest one, I think, for a lot of us because there's just timing issues and we have to make sure that we get this done right. Otherwise, the next year's payroll can be a little messed up. So the first thing that you want to do towards the end of the year is, if not on the last check, on a, I call them a W-2 add back check, where you're recording special year-end items such as owner health insurance add backs. You can add those in as a special check. Personal use of auto, that's something that you can add in to their last check of the year. Any third-party sick pay that you need to record. All those type of things of any wages that need to get recorded in order to be committed to the year of 2018 for W-2 purposes. You want to make sure that you get those in before the end of the year. If you have specific questions about how to do specific items, you can certainly call us or call Sage support. Can usually help you through those type of checks too. Like personal auto is one that I typically see. Just add it into the last payroll check. Sometimes I see these items entered in as just a separate check altogether just to get the taxes recorded. The download and install year-end release. I put if necessary. I have another slide where we're going to talk about the upgrades. I'm going to come back to that. That's a topic all by itself, so we will talk about that. What I'm indicating there is the year-end release that Sage recommends that holds all of the changes that could be to the government forms. Okay, that's not the tax update there that I'm indicating there. That's your actual upgrade. You want to process and post your last payroll for the year. So you really want to treat December just like you normally would. You're going to treat December as it's the end of a quarter, right? So you want to run all your normal fourth quarter reports, potentially year-to-date reports. You might want to have, you want to run those after you post, have the backups of all of that. But if you think about this in just a little bit more smaller of a mindset, where just think about December like it's the end of a normal month, and you have to have close fourth quarter. You know, you want to do your same procedures that you would do for any other quarter. All right. Once you have that all printed out and you know your numbers look good for 2018, you're going to back up your files. And again, there's that appendix that helps you know what payroll files to back up, and using file tools to do that. And then you can go to close your payroll year. And so that's just listed under task close year. You're going to go through it, close the year, and it will prompt you to go ahead and roll into the new year. And I'm actually going to open the software and walk you through this. Just realized I accidentally closed Sage, so I apologize for that. Those of you familiar with the newer look of the desktop, although I could go into these tasks individually, I'm actually just going to open the entire payroll module because we're going to be going into several things in payroll. So open it that way. So under payroll, it's going to be task, and then you'll have it's actually you go into task and then the close year right here. So normally you're doing the close month here, but you're going to do close year just at this time. Just so you know too, like if you were in November and you accidentally had somebody click close year at the wrong time and it wasn't the end of the year, the software will not do it. It knows to only close at the end of the calendar year. And this is exactly the message you'll get. So my software, or my sample data, is actually in May still. So it will not close it. But what you'll see here is you'll do task close year, and it will just tell you, here's the current year is 2018. Here's what the new year is going to be, 2019. That should be good. You click OK. The nice thing with payroll is that you can't accidentally be in an old year. Like some other modules, you can forget to close. A payroll, as you know, those that process payroll, you don't have to be in, you have to close the month every month in order to post your checks. So the payroll is constantly reminding you about that. So this becomes a very easy task at the end of the year. The next thing too that you want to do, and you got to time this out a little bit, so you have to kind of sketch out how your checks are going to end. So I'll repeat this again, but this is the rule. When you're done posting your checks for 2018, and before you process your first payroll run for 2019, you want to do the download of the tax update. Now, the tax update is not the same as the year-end upgrade that Sage talks about. They're two different things. The tax update only has to be done on one computer. It's shared then amongst all of them. And it is a very quick process that runs, but you have to have the timing right, because you don't want to download these taxes right away when they become available, because you may not, in your company, have done your last payroll yet. You want those 2018 tax rates still in there. So once you are ready to do that, you just go to Tools, Download Taxes. Your client ID will pre-fill. You check the box to update the tax when that's complete, and then you hit Start. print that to PDF so you can see what the journal looks like. It should be very quick. You do have to be connected to the internet, so most of us are when we're running Sage anyways. But it should not run for more than 2 or 3 minutes. My computer is unusually slow today, so I have to apologize for that. I'm not sure what it has going on. And then you'll get this message right here. You click OK, and it will just close out. The printout is really boring. It should just say that the taxes were updated. I'll show you what that looks like. So it's just going to tell you taxes have been backed up. They downloaded it, it copied, and this is what you're looking for right here. Completed normally. And if you're curious about what is happening with that tax update, when Sage releases that payroll tax update, they send out an email, and then they'll have the details about what is on the tax update, and it will tell you what changes, what taxes should have changed, and that's how you check to see that this worked correctly. So if they say that the federal tax has changed, the federal withholding has changed, then you want to go into your setup tax rates. You're going to look at federal withholding, and you want to make sure that the effective date has been updated. And it would be 1/1/19, obviously, but sometimes federal withholding doesn't change. Oftentimes, they will update that effective date on the federal withholding just so that you know that it is updated, but I did notice that last year they changed that. They didn't do that quite the same. So you just want to know how to get that in there. Right. The other thing that you have to change manually, so this download taxes, that's going to update all of your withholdings, like federal withholdings, state withholdings. It knows how to do all of that. It knows how to do some of the local taxes, but it doesn't know your unemployment rates. I mean, obviously everybody has a different unemployment rate, so you do have to manually get those updated as well as update the limits. And those are done through setup taxes. You go into your tax rates again, and then any states that you have to pay unemployment for, you want to go in and mark both the rate change and then the limit if that has changed too. It's a big one. You want to really kind of take note of this because this is a really, really common error that people forget to do because they assume that the tax update somehow knows how to do that. But you want to make sure that you have that done before your first payroll too. Workers' comp rates, I mean, if your policy changes on a calendar year, then you want to update those through the setup fringes in your workers' comp table. But typically I don't know, I'd see more policies that don't run on calendar year opposed to when they do. But that's kind of a year-end process too. It's just a different time of the year. So you want to make sure that your workers' comp rates are updated if necessary at this calendar year. And then once you have that payroll update in, you can begin processing your payroll for the new year. You can still run reports on the prior year, but we just don't want payroll getting processed with the old tax update. And then here I mentioned about printing your W-2s through Atrix and then moving checks to history. And again, you don't want to move your checks to history actually until you've done your W-2s and you've filed all of the government forms because Atrix needs your current file in there to do that. And again, that's why archiving doesn't necessarily need to happen right when you close the year. It's usually a task that's done after all the year-end fun has ended. So you want to make sure you're not too jumping the gun on that either. Regarding the W-2s and the Atrix, I want to just point out where you go to update that. I'm sure if you run payroll or out of your company, you know this already, that when you go into tasks and federal e-file and reporting or even state e-file and reporting, those are the places you're going to run your W-2s from. And Atrix is constantly updating the software. Matter of fact, on the 20th of every month, Atrix diligently always checks and will always submit that update. And that's why you kind of get annoyed sometimes because it's constantly saying, oh, here's a new update to install. Well, if it sees that you haven't done that since the last 20th that it asked you, the last time it asked you to do that, it will keep prompting for that. If that's not something you typically do, you want to make sure that you do it this time, because this time is when the W-2 forms get updated. And I've already done mine. I've had to do this several times just for example purposes, but you'll see that now I updated yesterday and it ran that update in Atrix, and now I'm seeing all the 2018 941, the ACA forms are in there, as well as the W-2s are down here too. Okay. Any questions on payroll?
Okay. I had one question.
Yes.
If you're outsourcing your payroll, there's no need that you have to do the tax update portion, correct?
Right, because when you're bringing your data back in, are you just doing a journal entry or like a job cost direct entry to record that? You're not running like a, okay.
And, GL entries.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. If you're outsourcing your payroll, this doesn't really apply to you because you're not having to process your own payroll in-house.
Okay,
that is
thank
correct.
You.
Yep, yep. Okay, come on. Okay, so the AP close process is pretty easy too, actually. It takes literally less than a minute usually to close your AP, actually go through the task of closing AP, and that is very similar to what I just showed you in payroll. Let me get into AP here. So there's going to be a task here for close year and close 1099 year. Obviously this is on a calendar year. If you have a fiscal year that ends as of 12/31, then you're going to want to close the year here too. With AP, January is usually the time that you're going to close this. It's not as stringent as payroll where we have to close that year before you actually process anything in January. Whereas AP, as you know, you still got invoices maybe trickling in that you need to get recorded for December, and they're still trickling in January. So typically this close year process is not done until January. After you know that the month has been closed in GL, you've got everything recorded in AP that you need to, and then you go in and close the year. So it's a little bit different. It's more of a normal month-end close type situation, except for you're in December, so you have to minimally close your 1099 year. Again, the close year, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. If your fiscal year ends on 3/31, then you're going to wait until your fiscal year end close and the last month of your fiscal year end closes to do that. Any questions on that, the difference between the two? Okay. And the one big thing that can happen with AP is AP does allow for you to run your 1099s on prior year data. So what can easily happen with AP is that it doesn't force you to close a month, right? There's no month-end close. It's only once a year that you do it, and it's a task that can easily be forgotten about. If you go to close your 1099 year and you see something scary, such as the current year ending date might be 2015, like mine is, and the new year ending date only goes to 16, you want to contact Sage or contact us to help you with that, because that can really mess up your 1099s if the 1099 year has not been closed properly in the past, or if you skipped a year. It starts to roll all the totals into one bucket, and then what you're getting for year-to-date totals just becomes messy, and we have to kind of go through all the checks and run some reports to figure out what should actually fall into the years. So that would be the one warning. The one thing that could get difficult with AP is that if you don't see 2018 as your current year ending date, that really needs to be a red flag for you to reach out to somebody to get some help with that and to check to make sure your totals are right. Any questions on that? Okay. There are some 1099 reports you can use to prepare to run your 1099s. I'm sure this will probably get discussed in the Atrix class too, but you can start going through the list of who should receive a 1099 by going into the reports, miscellaneous, and then the 1099 prep report. You're going to pick by vendor. I'm just going to preview this. What you should see is the prior year's amount, and then the current year amount will be listed here. Again, our sample data is in 2015. That's why that looks a little weird. But you're going to see any vendor that is marked to receive a 1099. So your vendors, on your setup of your vendors, they have a little toggle. For example, A1 Electric, I see them on the list here, and that is because on their setting here, they have this box marked to receive a 1099 form. So another way to look at this, and another question that I commonly get is, what happens if, if my vendors aren't marked with that, but they should be, then what do I do? Because I want to be able to see all of my vendors, right, and see that, oops, we missed ABC subcontractor because somebody forgot to mark that box when the vendor was set up. The way you can look for those is when you run this report, there's a condition in here set for that checkbox. You can just simply delete it. You're going to get all of your vendors, just to let you know, but you can delete that and then print preview it again. And then you're going to get everybody, and you can analyze, okay, scan through it and look to see who may need a 1099 that's not marked as one. As well as what you're looking for is the missing tax IDs here too. And then it'll be covered further in an Atrix class, or if you follow the steps in the on the year-end guide, it'll show you how to run the 1099s, but that is done through just government e-file and reporting. That's also done through Atrix, and then the Form 1099 is right here. And I'm not going to go through running that today. Any questions on that? All right. Let's see where I'm at here. Okay, so GL. Obviously, when you go to close the GL, this is assuming that we're doing this class this time of the year, which is great for those of you that have a fiscal year end of 12/31. But those that don't, just keep these tasks in mind because they're the same things that you would do at fiscal year end. So this is stuff to do at fiscal year end, not just calendar year end, obviously. You want to just treat your last month of the year. I'm just going to say that your last month is December of your fiscal year. Just like I was talking about with AP, you want to make sure all of your transactions are posted. Everything, you basically start from the ground up, and you want to post all of your subledgers. So you're going to post AR, AP, make sure payroll is posted, equipment cost, any other module that you may own. You just want to make sure service management, purchasing and inventory, everything is posted. And then lastly, you're going to post GL. When you're closing the year, please make sure that you check your posting journals for rejections. If you're reconciling monthly, you should be catching those rejections anyways and addressing them. If you have GL rejections that are just like growing, you've addressed them with a journal entry, for example, but they just keep showing up on the posting journal every month, you might want to get that taken care of. That's something that we can clean out. Sage can help you get rid of those, or one of our consultants can help you with that too. You just want to really clean up your general ledger at this point and make sure everything that needs to be posted is posted. And then of course you run your financial statements and your other reports. And then before you back up, before you close, you're going to want to back up the year. So GL does a little bit more than the other modules do for year-end close. And although you might cheat a little bit when you go to close some of the other modules about whether you make a backup or not, I would highly, highly recommend that you always back up your GL files before you close the year. And this is because General Ledger has a special process with closing the year. It is taking your, it closes your retained earnings for you. So it's going out and it's looking at all of your income and expense accounts, and it is going to close those for you. So in addition to rolling all the buckets of all of the periods that it has to deal with, it also is taking all those transactions and it is making an entry. And you just don't want anything to happen during that, or if it does happen in the middle of that, it can be a real mess. So just please make sure you do a backup before you close your year end in GL. So a real common question is, okay, I close the year because I want to close the year because I need to run January financials, right? And I need to run February and March, and my accountants aren't going to have my final numbers yet. You know, don't stay stuck in December. You can close the year and you can re-close the year after you get those journal entries. So the way that looks is you want to close your month of December, your last month of your year, just like you would any other month. You're going to reconcile the month. You're going to run your financials and get everything posted. And then at that point, typically you're sending off your data to your accountants for review. And you can then still continue business as usual going into the new year. And when they come back with those adjustments, what you can do is go back into task open close posting period. Pick the general ledger prefix if you have these set up that the entries are for. And then you just want to open up the month that you're making entries to, okay? So you're going to open the last period of your fiscal year. So if this was my fiscal year, I'd come back in, and let's say I got my journal entries back. Well, these months have all been closed now because my accountants are still working on, they haven't been able to get to my stuff till May. Well, I can come back here and I can reopen December. Click accept, go in, record my entries. So I'm going to record my accountant's journal entries, post them. And then what I'm going to do is go to task, close fiscal year again. Make sure I have a backup. And then it's going to make this entry. So what will happen is that with all of your accountant's journal entries that they give you, of course, anything that has hit an expense or an income account is going to net, and then that's going to be the new adjustment to your retained earnings. So it's going to attempt to do another close here. And then what you're going to want to do even on the first year-end close is verify that the dollar amount you see here matches your net income. Okay. If it looks good, then you're going to click accept and let it run through its process. You'll notice here that it said that there was no there was no entries to be made. You can't break this. You can't accidentally close the fiscal year again. It just doesn't let you do that. It's coming out here and it's doing some checks and balances to make sure that you're not accidentally doing that. But really what it's doing after you make your journal entries is checking for those prior year adjustments again. So after you accept that and close out, you'll get a journal again that has all the entries that it made, and then you'll want to go back in to task open close posting period, and you'll want to re-close down that December month. So I very often see companies not close December or the last month of their fiscal year because they're waiting for accountants adjustments, which leaves them kind of in the dark for all those months between, December and March, for example, before they get their accountant's entries back. And you don't need to do that. That closed fiscal year is intended to have that task where it will close again. And again, the year-end guide explains all of this too. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. And this is just what I talked about with the common close issues that you might run into. It's, that you end up with the prior year adjustments maybe. Sometimes you don't even realize that there's prior year adjustments out there and that they haven't been closed. A common symptom of having some old prior year adjustments in there is that your balance sheet can be out of balance. That's a real common one because it's affecting retained earnings. The other thing too that can happen is that you go to close the year and this dollar amount that you see in here, oops, sorry about that. The dollar amount that you see here doesn't tie to what you're seeing on your net income for 12/31, for example. So you're looking at it and you're going, well, that doesn't match. What's the difference here? And that typically has to do with possibly an account being set up with the wrong type. So maybe you set up an expense account this year, a brand new one, and you forgot to mark it as an expense and it just defaulted to the current asset. So it isn't necessarily causing your trial balance to be out of balance, but it is causing the close year process to not recognize it as an expense account. And again, if you see that that number doesn't match your net income, you don't want to keep going with it. You want to cancel out and resolve that first, because it's a lot harder to fix after the fact if you just keep going with it and it's not matching your net income. Okay. There's other modules that have, close year processes in that, again, they're not very stringent. Cash management is one that, boy, people forget to even close that one for years and you don't even notice, because the main thing that you do in cash management typically is you might be just reconciling. You're running a lot of reconciliation reports, so those don't care what calendar fiscal year you're on. But that is a module that has a calendar fiscal year. AR also does, and AR will get a little crabby at you if you forget about that for a couple years, and when you go to post it will tell you that you're too far gone basically, and you got to go in and close the year. And both of those are just under task close year. Again, literally takes just a couple seconds to run those, and those are something you're going to want to run in January, for example, if you're on a calendar fiscal year, or whenever your GL last month is closed fiscal year wise. The other modules, they kind of act like business as usual. So job cost closes by month, so does contracts, and then property management has that too. And you just close those like you normally would, and it just knows that when you're in the last month of your fiscal year, it automatically will roll the year for you, as will the quarter. So those ones are pretty easy, just like I said, business as usual for those. So the all-time discussion of year-end usually is all the emails we get from Sage about what versions are supported. So feel free to chime in if you have questions, because this is very confusing every year. First of all, let's just, again, I want to reiterate that there is a year-end upgrade and there is a tax update. They are two separate things. So the payroll tax update is the one that we should be getting next week. And that's the one where I showed you, where you just go into payroll, task, download taxes. It gets done on one machine. That's it. The upgrade is the one where you have to install it at the server, and then you have to run it on each Sage workstation. Okay. Any questions about the difference between those? Okay. So for 2018, Sage is supporting, their active versions are version 17 and 18. So there's an 18.1, 0.2, and 0.22. So there's a couple different versions of 18. The latest one that includes the year-end changes is 18.2.2. Sage has sent out various emails, probably you've received, or if you've taken any of their classes, they are going to tell you for sure that you have to upgrade to this version in order to print your W-2s and your 1099s and your ACA forms. Like, those are needed, that upgrade needs to be done for that. I just want to say to you that I have had my experience myself. I'm still in version 16 just because I haven't upgraded yet. You notice that when I took you into payroll and we looked at the forms, I'm seeing my 2018 W-2 forms. I can run 2018 1099s. I see the 2018 ACA forms. I have clients that are on version 15 that have tested that this week. They've updated Atrix and they've called me and said, hey, why do I have to do this upgrade? I can see my 2018 W-2 forms. I'm going to wait to do it. I'm only the messenger here. Sage is saying that you have to do that, but I'm finding from experience that I'm learning just this week, and we've seen this sometimes in the past too, where Atrix is taking care of that update and they are updating correctly and they're in there and they can process correctly. So my best recommendation to you is if you have an upgrade already scheduled, I would not cancel it. Get upgraded to the most current version of the software, because by no means am I telling you not to upgrade. You need to be in a supported version. You know, version 15 and 16 are both retired versions of the product. Well, 16 will be after this year. And Sage is always going to help you. We're always going to help you if you're on an older version. We're going to do our very best. But if you come across any kind of issue that can't be resolved, installation, something not installed, you know, workstation not running right, we kind of get our hands tied there, because when you're on a retired version, even as a consultant, you know, Sage can't help much because they're not tested environments anymore. So that's why I'm saying you do need to get upgraded. Whether you need to do it right now kind of depends on your own environment. If you're a company that runs W-2s, ACA forms, or 1099s, I would highly recommend that you jump into your Atrix forms and let that update run, and then do a test drive and see if you can see your 2018 form show up. Now, the data doesn't necessarily have to be final. Just do a test drive and make sure that you can see those forms, because you may be able to push your upgrade off until a little bit later, you know, maybe early next year, to make sure that to give you a little bit of time and a little bit of breathing room at this time of the year. It's a tough time of the year, and in some years they require that you have to have that done. In some years you kind of get lucky. And I don't know if all the people I've talked to so far, just in their particular environment, that it's working. In my environment, it's working where I'm seeing the new forms. You need to test it really to confirm that you're able to see the new forms. And again, if you have an upgrade planned, go through with it if you already have it scheduled, because then you get it done and it's over and you don't have to really deal with it again in 2019. So any questions on that? It's a very confusing subject every year end. And so, you know, even if you have a certain scenario you want to discuss with me, I'm open to hear that right now, because everybody else might benefit from hearing that question.
So
I just have one question. This is Kim, and I just want to confirm. We are currently on 17 point something. Does that mean I can proceed with all of my year-end W-2 1099s, and then I can worry about updating later?
You should be able to. And so what I would do is I would go into payroll and make sure, you know, go into your federal e-file and forms, run that update, and if you see the 2018 forms in there, you are fine.
Okay,
you can
great.
Wait.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The other thing that I do want to point out, that there was one change in the release notes for 18.2.2, and that had to do with ACA. So in ACA setup, and I know I might be just talking to a select few of you, but this is a situation where you would want to get the upgrade installed. Under setup employees, my goodness, there is a button right in here, employee and dependent detail. And in the past, this data, you would have to re-enter it every single year. And the one that really is a pain is this stuff down here. This doesn't occur to a lot of people, because the only reason you'd have to put dependent information in there is if you're on a self-insured health plan. I don't know how many of you that even applies to, but in the past, this has not carried over from year to year. Now what they're saying is that the data that you have sitting in there right now will carry over when you close the year in payroll. This data up here, they also are saying carries over, And to be quite frank, I'm not sure what value that always has, because Mr. Test employee, June of 2018, he might not be full-time in June of 2019. So that, you know, even their share of coverage, you're going to have to reanalyze that in 2019 anyways. So to me, that doesn't seem like a huge reason to upgrade, is just to have this data carry over. But if you're a company that has a self-insured health plan, you're going to want to try to get that brand new upgrade that just came out last Friday. Try to get that in before you close your payroll year. So that's a little bit of a time crunch. But again, I can honestly say I do not know any company, I don't personally work with any company that has a self-insured health plan that they've had to put all this information in. Do any of you on the call have a self-insured health plan provided by your company? No, okay. And if you read the release notes from the year-end update that was released last Friday, that's the only thing that they say changed. However, it was a little confusing because when you watch the video, it said you have to install this in order to run your W-2s and 1099s. And so I just tried it and I saw mine, and you have to test it, do a test drive. That's the beauty of Atrix, is they allow you to do a test drive, and go ahead and do a preliminary one just to make sure. Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay. So for those of you that might be lingering in version 15 or 16 still, one thing that I'm going to recommend, and I'm going to recommend that you don't just jump to version 17. I would, in your planning for upgrading, I would plan to just go right to 18. And the reason is that in version 17, the system requirements are quite high, and in 18, they lowered them again. So there was a lot of complaints in 17, and they lowered what they could in version 18. So you're coming into a version that has basically kind of corrected some of that system requirement resource issues. And so I would never recommend anybody at this point to go from 15, 16, or set to right to 17 and then go to 18. I would just plan to go to 18. However, you do need to look at the hardware requirements if you're planning that. And if you have an estimating products, that is a big consideration, because estimating does not have a pervasive database anymore as a version 18. You have to go to estimating SQL version 18. So 18 is kind of it's a big one to think about if you have estimating, because you have to be on the same page with estimating. Whereas in the past, we just kind of let estimating install the same version, and it just kind of tagged along with our accounting products. Whereas this, it's going to be a big deal if you are integrating estimating and accounting, that you need to talk to the an estimating consultant to see how to get that changed over to SQL. And again, that's something to discuss with probably a consultant is the best one to talk to about that. Sage support might be able to give you in the right direction, but they're probably going to refer you back to a consultant too if you have specific questions about timing and how to do that. And the other thing too that you always want to consider, and I don't have it listed on the PowerPoint, is that you want to make sure that any third-party products that might integrate with Sage are compatible with that version 18 software. As of right now, all of the bigger third-party products, such as my Assistant, Event One's Office Connector, TimberScan, those are all supported with the latest version. But you always want to check that too before you do an upgrade. And again, that's just part of upgrade planning, not necessarily just a year-end thing. That's what you should always do when you plan for an upgrade. So hopefully some of you are taking a deep breath going, oh, I hope I can see my 2018 forms, because maybe I can wait a little bit to get that upgrade done. But again, you do have to get upgraded, just maybe not the pressure to do it right at this minute. And this is that slide I was thinking of when we first started. A long time ago when I started with Sage, somebody said to me, this product is huge and there's a lot of things to learn, and you're always learning something new, like, oh, I didn't know it could do that. And And they said you can never memorize everything. You just have to know where to find the answers, right? So that's the most important thing, is that if you're not sure what the answer is, then just know where to find some help for it. We're always a resource for you. We've got a 800 number there you can call. And when you call into our office, the way that it works is we take that support request, and then we try to find a consultant that's available the soonest to help you with it. The year-end procedures guide, that's the document that you should have received today. I want to actually show you where that's at in the software. That is always available to you, even after year-end. So those of you that have, different fiscal year-end dates, that guide is always out there if you happen to misplace or not print out that one that we sent to you. So if you go into the software and go under Help and then Product Documents, you're going to go under your Sage 300, and you'll see your year-end form is right there. So you'll see the year-end procedures guide. Now that's the 2018 one. That will sit out there until next December. Then they'll update it with the 2019 one towards the end of December. But the procedures in general don't change too much from year to year, but that's a good guide to know that it's there. The other thing too is that if you didn't know this, all the versions of software that are out here, there's documents on each one of them through this Help Product Document. So version 18, if you wanted to see what was contained in that, you could read the release notes. Your system requirements are here. We have a new tool called Sage SQL Replicator. You could read about what that is involved. And we also have Sage is introducing a lot of different mobile products. You could read about that. Anything to do with My Assistant. There's a lot of information here. The one that you always want to look at, and they even say it contains critical information to read before you do any install. You always want to read that important document before you do any upgrading. And then the payroll tax one is that separate one I talked about, and this is where those release notes will indicate what tax IDs changed or what their rates changed. If we looked at this right now, it's not going to have the very last one for the year, but it should have all the accumulative ones that have happened throughout the year. Just to give you an idea what this shows as. So there's been several tax updates throughout the year. Sorry, that's a little bit hard to read. Let me try to get that out of there. But what that's telling you is just, okay, what changed in here? So I see Oregon, New Mexico, like each tax update, it's telling us what was changed. So Illinois state withholding changed at the beginning of the year. And then also it also has updating taxes, how to do it, and the steps are in there too for downloading and installing your taxes, as well as I believe those steps are in the year-end guide too. And then the Sage City is a good place for resources too. It looks like recently they kind of moved things around a little bit. If you go to Sage City, there's a button down at the bottom, like a section down at the bottom that actually has a year-end button. It looks a little bit different, but I think this link still gets you there. The Sage City is a nice forum just in general, just users responding to things that Sage posts, and Sage is starting to post a lot of things out there. The other thing that I don't have listed that I just thought about is Sage U is another place for resources. And Sage U, and it's just sageu.com. They have a lot of classes. They have year-end classes out there. Some of their classes are free even, but they also have training guides for a lot of the products. They're not all free, but they're nominal cost too. If you have like just kind of miscellaneous training that you want to look at, as well as Sage has an anytime subscription too that you can access through Sage U to give you just overall training of the software. And then of course Sage support. Recent reports that I've had back is that Sage support's been extremely slow this year. They just get super busy this time of year, so you kind of want to expect that if you're going to have to call them, that you got a little bit of time on your hands. I know that they do have a callback system. If you're on hold for too long, they'll give you the option of calling back. Would highly recommend that you grab your cell phone for that number and keep that handy, because if you miss that call, you got to start all over. So that's just kind of a precursor to how they're how that will work so you don't end up in a bad, frustrating situation, being on hold for a long time and then missing somebody. All right. Any questions? I know it's a pretty big overview of everything.
You mentioned that some information was emailed out. I don't think I received it. Is there a way for me to, if it was the PowerPoint, is there a way for me to get a copy of that?
Yeah. So who am I talking to?
Kim Walker.
Okay. Kim, do you mind giving me your phone number? I'll just call you directly, or do you mind giving me your email? I don't know if you want to do that over the call or otherwise.
Oh, you know what, Christine? You
No,
know, Kim. Oh, sorry. This is Mallory. Christine, I have Kim's email. Kim, I'll resend you the information so you don't have to worry.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Thanks, Mallory.
Right now. No problem.
Did everybody else receive the PowerPoint and the year-end guide? I should say, did you not receive it? Let me know if you didn't receive it. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, that's all I have. And I know we're all very busy, so I can let you go here. And if you have any, if you need any help or have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always here to help. And good luck to everybody. Yeah, have a fun year end. You know how it's always, we love it, right?
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.